Hello and welcome to the D365 Insights podcast brought to you by Source and Connect. Today is episode 7, No Control, No Glory, Why Governance Matters in D365. We are welcoming our guest speaker, Andy Farrow, Program Director with more than 20 years experience in complex IT transformations. Hello, Andy. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Lovely to have you on. Thank you for coming. So Andy, can you start by telling us a bit about yourself, your role, your background, and the kind of dynamics programs you typically work on?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a strategic program leader. So I like to consider myself a program director with 20 plus years of experience, as you've already mentioned, driving multi-channel IT transformations. So I've led successful programs across a range of sectors, and they include financial services and compliance, the not-for-profit space, local government, and hospitality, just to name but a few. So I've worked also both client and partner side, so I've experienced both sides of the fence on a number of occasions. Now, delving back, my background is actually quite heavily technical because I started life as a developer, and then I progressed to leading a development team. And then I started to find myself being pulled more and more into the realms of project delivery, which I quickly found was probably more aligned with my strengths and interests, to be fair, than development ever was.
Okay,
And then
interesting.
just to sum up pretty much everything that I've done in terms of all the major transformation initiatives I've led over the years, they've been powered by Dynamics 365, so ERP and CRM predominantly.
Fantastic. Well, that must have given you a really good base having the technical experience first. It's
This
quite
fits.
unusual, actually, isn't it, to go sort of technical into program management? That's normally sort of the route from a functional, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it was the moving from the darkened room, old style developer into I was actually involved with people, which was great, which was more my thing.
Yeah,
So yeah, it was enlightening. I didn't really realize it was happening at the time, but it just worked out that way. I suppose it was just meant to be.
yeah, absolutely. So, how did you get into program delivery in the dynamic space?
Well, okay, so this takes me back to the time of CRM4, which I think is late 2007.
Okay.
And as I just mentioned, so I got drawn into the world of program delivery, and I'll use a Star Wars analogy here, and I'll say I was seduced by the dark side. And then at that time, it was to deliver a help desk solution, which was in version 4 of CRM. But
Yeah,
I have to, based on my technical background, I couldn't let it go. So I kind of have to come clean and admit to being far too involved in the build than I probably should have ever been.
yeah,
And also, along with that, because of my interest with Dynamics as it was coming out, it wasn't called Dynamics then, but CRM, I started doing all my Microsoft certifications. And I kept them going up until 2016, where I just had to kind of say, look, stop, that's enough. But that
mm,
kind of being said, having that background, having that kind of technical sort of understanding of CRM was really useful, advantageous to me as I was leading programs that were predominantly CRM based at
yeah,
the time. So yeah, really, really good. So it's kind of for me, I look back at that and it's I see it as a really strong grounding for me in dynamics. So
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. So, let's start with the basics. When you hear the word governance in a Dynamics 365 program, what does that mean to you?
So that's music to my ears if I hear that from the project manager, from sponsors, from stakeholders. So yeah, so the word governance, for me in a dynamics program, is it speaks to clarity and control. So clarity in terms of transparency that it brings, understanding, alignment. So everybody is on the same page. And that's something that I'm quite big on promoting, is that everybody needs to be on the same page.
Yeah,
And regards control, so oversight, structure, and responsiveness. So governance really is probably a word that's at the forefront of my vocabulary when it comes to leading programs. So there's a few others, but they're probably not for the podcast, to be fair.
Podcast for another day.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, fantastic. So why do you think governance is often overlooked or undervalued in ERP and CRM projects?
Yeah, so I think in some cases, it's just the way governance is introduced. It's people are seeing it as a compliance necessity
Hmm.
and not as it's meant to be, which is a strategic enabler.
Yeah,
And I think for some people that feels like that's just a checklist rather than them seeing any value add.
yeah,
Um, I also think it can be seen as added bureaucracy,
hmm,
um, and perceived as something that's just going to slow progress, just going to get in the way of things. And I've come across that a few times. I think the key thing to understand here is that when governance is actually done correctly, done right, it actually accelerates the delivery. It safeguards the program effectively. It
yeah.
reduces rework, it clarifies the accountability, and obviously it aligns the stakeholders. And as I keep, I'll bang on about everybody on the same page.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So have you ever worked on a project where governance was completely absent and what happened?
Oh yes, in
Many.
well, certainly in my earlier days, I experienced this. So when I was transitioning, from developer into delivery, I found myself running projects without any appropriate governance, as I'll call it.
Hmm.
But then, having said that, at the time, the organisation I was working for probably had no concept of the importance of appropriate governance, and probably weren't even interested in it, to be fair.
Yeah,
Needless to say, timelines did extend, scope changed clearly, and costs spiraled. So, the projects actually were crazily viewed as success once they'd gone live. But then, I suppose, with no defined success criteria, nothing to measure against, senior leadership were well within their rights to kind of promote it as a success. Although, when you look back at it, what it should have cost as opposed to what it did cost, not sure it was as big a success as these things were played out to be.
yeah, absolutely. And that's it, isn't it? Just comes down to the cost impact that it has. Um, so what are the most visible signs that a project lacks governance?
So yeah, there's a number of telltale signs. Project lacks governance. There's a bit of sarcasm here. The little things like unclear scope, lack of success criteria, no budget control, just general lack of governance related artifacts, non-viable plan,
Hmm.
lack of clarity on roles, responsibilities, the reversing of decisions, uh, I don't know, inadequate risk management, and a dysfunctional strategic committees. The list can go on and on. So it's
Yeah,
definitely not limited to things above, but there's a lot there that you can quite easily start to see whether governance is really being applied properly.
yeah, yeah. So can you share an example where introducing the right governance model turned a struggling project around?
So yeah, I mean there've been a few over the years. So because I've been asked to sort of pick up a number of distress programs over the top period that I've been doing this business, and turn them around. So, which more than happy to do. So, in this particular example that I'm going to talk to, it was a transformational program that had, if you can believe it, already been running for 4 years prior to my arrival.
Yeah.
When I got my hands on, I could see exactly why that was the case.
Hmm.
So, I think, in a nutshell, I introduced and implemented a governance framework that actually brought some structure and clarity. Um, and that was the enabler for the program to reset and then move forwards from that point. I mean, that was an incredibly tough gig in terms of the people that we were dealing with, or I was dealing with directly. So, yeah, there was a lot of political maneuvering at that gig.
Yeah, yeah. I can imagine. So in your experience, how does good governance directly impact budget control, delivery timelines, or user adoption?
Okay, so if I go one by one, I think on this then. So
Yeah.
budget control, governance can help prevent scope creep through a structured control process. So it helps with reducing rework and duplication by clarifying roles and decisions, and it can certainly help improve forecasting and budget tracking through reporting, right?
Hmm.
Um, I also think that governance naturally helps the delivery timelines, as when it's properly managed, as I've spoke to before, it actually improves the sort of responsiveness and the predictability, and things get done quicker. Um, and this is where there has to be a pragmatic approach to governance as well. It's not governance for governance sake. With user adoption, I think it's about aligning the delivery with the user needs, and that's achieved through stakeholder engagement clearly. So it's pretty basic stuff. And governance also helps with the quality and usability, as well as building trust and transparency, so everybody on the same page,
Yeah.
which positively drives up the adoption rate. So again, it's a win-win with governance, and people, the sooner people see that and embrace that, the quicker we get on.
Yeah. No brainer. So
Could say that,
what
yeah.
you could say that, yeah. So what does strong governance look like in a D365 program in terms of structure, meetings, roles, etc.?
Yeah, so I'll refer to this. So this is probably yeah, a minimum sort of or a lean governance structure. So a minimum viable governance, if you like. That for me is kind of non-negotiable in any D365 delivery. So you have to have clear project goals and success criteria against those, so that you know that you've met those goals. You have to have measurable outcomes, so tied to the business value, so you can show that. And then I would suggest you absolutely need a steering committee with clearly defined. They have to have their roles clearly defined, and roles and responsibilities clearly defined, because otherwise that can just become dysfunctional. Um,
Hmm.
these people are the decision makers. They're also the point of escalation, and they're going to oversee the key areas of the scope, budget, risks, etc. Um, roles and responsibilities. So a RACI to show who's the obvious responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed, and you include business stakeholders within that. A change control process, so a way to document and manage change, because on that, it's just guaranteed you're going to get changes. A RAID log to help with the management of risks and issues, and to obviously log assumptions and dependencies. But the thing with this is, it's just logging stuff isn't enough. So you have to actively manage your risks and issues. And there's a whole piece can talk around about how that needs to work effectively, and how I found that that does work effectively. Um, and if I just quickly touch on assumptions, because it kind of still blows my mind as to sort of how little importance some people put on them. So for me, they're key, especially where there's uncertainty, as they allow sort of continuation, and they're also a point in time rationale.
Hmm.
So, as to what helped inform your decision or whatever it might be. And it's something you can refer back to if things suddenly change in the future. It's, at that point in time, this is what you based your rationale on. Do they still hold? If they don't, you've kind of got a story that you can
Hmm.
tell, and it helps with those conversations with people. Uh, delivery framework. So, what delivery methodology
Yeah.
is the project going to adopt? So, waterfall, agile, or a hybrid? Most of the ones I think I work on, certainly more recently over the recent years, have been hybrid. Comms plan. So, how are you going to commute, communicate your progress and keeping everyone engaged? So for me, I'll always take a pragmatic view to level of governance that's required on a program. So, as I said earlier, it's not governance for governance sake. The scale of the program, along with the appetite of the organisation, kind of helps determine what, if anything, additional is required to what I've just mentioned. Um, I do have to admit, though, that I do like to see a number of other things, like key strategy artifacts are always useful,
Yeah.
and a design authority and a change board are quite handy to have.
Yeah. Absolutely. So who should be involved in governance, and how do you avoid it becoming overly bureaucratic?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Well, starting with, I think So all project stakeholders will be affected, obviously, by the governance, and they
Mhm.
should therefore understand the processes and framework in place, or at least be aware of what's there, right? Whether they understand it to the nth degree is probably not essential, but that there is a governance framework, they know where that is, they can always see it, so it's not alien to anybody. So I think to determine who should be directly involved, I think you'd need to look at the strategic piece, so the operational and the stakeholder dimensions. So from a strategic relevance, I think you have to determine who are the influencers, right, and who is impacted directly by the program's goals. They're pretty critical to it. Operationally, who approves the funding, who understands the delivery mechanics and the risks around what's about to be embarked on. From a stakeholder perspective, who speaks for the users and the customers or external partners. I'm a big one for saying that you should look to try and keep it as lean as possible. So again, it's all about adopt a pragmatic approach to the level of governance that is required. And in that way, you can hopefully avoid death by bureaucracy,
Yeah.
which I've walked into before.
Yeah. So, what kind of decision-making frameworks do you recommend for large or multi-phase programs?
Okay, so I tend to use the really simple and easy to understand stage gate model. As I said, it's straightforward, it's easy to adopt. I think people are generally comfortable with it, they get it. It just structures decisions around stage gates with a clear entry and exit criteria. So I've said really simple to understand and to
Mhm.
implement. And I think it's a great way of allowing for a sort of early identification of issues before they escalate as well. So it's really useful, but it's more about it's the ease. There's a number of different models that you can adopt, but this seems to work. It's kind of tried and trusted, so I tend to stick with that.
Yeah. Okay. So, moving on to some sort of challenges and tensions, how do you strike the right balance between agility and governance, especially in fast-moving transformation projects?
So I think just remain pragmatic.
Hmm.
Just implement only what's needed and avoid over engineering. So when it's managed well, governance is not going to slow things down.
No.
And a fear of delay, which is a biggie here, should never justify avoiding implementing governance. I mean, in my experience, this has happened a few times, but I've come across instances where I've been told, by a team, we're agile, so we don't require governance. So I very quickly explain and evidence the need for governance, which
Yeah.
to date has had a positive outcome in favour of governance usage. So I always find those types of conversations enlightening, trying to understand what's behind the thinking, and when you call out some of the obvious things, like when do you know you're done, and also I think 9 times out of 10 these projects are not truly agile. So an agile is not an excuse for having no documentation
Yeah.
and control.
Yeah,
So
definitely. And have you seen governance be too heavy-handed? What's the danger when it becomes a blocker rather than an enabler?
so I've experienced an ask for what I considered at the time as an over-engineered governance framework. So by evidencing the risks and the inefficiencies that it posed, and I saw in that, I managed to avert its implementation. We simplified it. So I steered the program towards a sort of more, I don't know, I keep using this word, pragmatic, sort of fit for purpose approach. So I think the dangers, they're numerous. So yeah, you have the potential for delivery delays if there's excessive approvals. So you're slowing down decision making. Uh, for the agile guys, loss of agility with an inability, they can't pivot or respond to change due to inflexible processes. And the program can very quickly find itself in a very unhelpful position where governance is viewed as obstructive. And
Yeah.
then you find that teams look to bypass this. and you don't always see that that's happening straight away. And you really do not want to find yourself in that position.
Mm. So it's about getting a balance then, really.
It is. It's just implementing what is required, okay, to kind of safeguard the program. It's
Yeah,
not implementing every angle, every element of governance that anyone's ever thought of, because it's just not going to help.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So how do you get buy-in from stakeholders who see governance as red tape?
So with this is always interesting. So you kind of have to reframe governance as an enabler and
Yeah,
get them to see it's not as a barrier. And I think the way to approach this is, you need to clarify the value it brings. So, explain and show how governance reduces rework, how it clarifies accountability, and actually it accelerates delivery. So you can also link the governance to sort of tangible benefits, such as robust spend control, faster timelines, stronger user adoption, to name a few. So there's certainly things that you can do to help change the red tape narrative, and it is quite common with people making these bold statements about it's just red tape. I even had somebody saying it was just admin. Um, Very interesting.
well, and I guess it's your job to then educate them, what the benefits are and turning that thought process around, isn't it?
Exactly that, and those conversations are quite enjoyable, actually.
Yeah. I can see you enjoy it. Um, so what practical tools or templates do you use to support governance?
Okay, so I mean, there's a multitude of things, tools and templates that are available. For me personally, my starting sort of core artifacts are the contract, the baseline scope, which the detail for me, used to using DevOps, would be in DevOps, um, resourced and costed plan, so a viable plan, a RACI, a budget tracker. Then there's the RAID log and decision log, and I'd have those both managed in DevOps, which works quite well, along with management of actions. So people that know me will know I'm a strong advocate for Microsoft Project to manage plans, because that's, for me, it offers the robust scheduling, great resource control, and it gives me the visibility I need across the programs. And that timeline feature is a lifesaver in simplifying a view of what the overall timeline is and how things are dependent on each other. It's brilliant. A lot of people don't like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. Well, I do get it, but no, Microsoft Project is still probably, I'd say, the leader for me. I haven't seen anything else that betters it. So DevOps is key. It'll hold the detail level of the baseline scope. So in the form of user stories, business articulated acceptance criteria, business approval, obviously. And the thing with DevOps is that everything is date stamped. So it's easy to see if anyone tries to pull a fast one. Not for 1 minute am I suggesting that anybody does, but it's very easy to see, and everybody's aware of that. DevOps is also great for managing the RAID log, obviously, change control, decisions, and actions. But for me, as we said at the top of the call, just before we came on here, budget tracking does tend to always end up in Excel.
Okay. Great. So what governance habits or rhythms do you swear by?
Um, so I think the key core would be monthly steering committees.
Yep.
Bi-weekly risk reviews to ensure, and evidence the active management of the risks and issues, and a weekly review with the PM. So that's kind of the minimum, but the weekly review with the PM allows them to evidence to me sort of the progress against the plan and the budget, and if there's been any changes and how everything aligns. You can see in DevOps, and that's that conversation. But it's not just for that as well. It'd be about checking in on their well-being, and also talking to them about the well-being of the team, because that's critical. and sometimes that's forgotten, probably less so these days, but certainly in the early days it used to be. But it's very important, and I like to have that kind of relationship with my teams. So anybody can talk to me, and I'll dip in and I'll chat to them as well. But well-being is critical for the
Yeah.
program, the success of the program. You do not want to lose anybody. You don't want to break anybody.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, a happy team is a successful team, isn't it? Um,
True.
yeah, absolutely. So moving on to the last few questions. If you had just 60 seconds to sell governance to a project sponsor, what would you say?
So this is where the title of the podcast really comes into its own. So no
Timing.
control, no control, no glory. Yeah,
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 true.
I brought that in.
Yeah,
So I don't know, something along the lines of governance isn't bureaucracy. It's an insurance policy for delivery.
yeah.
It gives you visibility, control, and confidence. I
Hmm.
think, and with the right governance, you know where your money's going, what risks are looming around, whether your teams are aligned to outcomes. It's a mechanism used to ensure sort of the right decisions happen at the right time, obviously with the right people.
Yeah,
Uh, and good governance means sort of fewer surprises, should do, faster course corrections, better ROI, which is always quite important. And it protects a reputation and the investment. Um, and I think around meetings, you don't need more meetings, you just need the right ones,
yeah.
clear and accessible, data-driven insights. So just to summarize that, I think governance just turns ambition into execution. And without it, you are literally flying blind. And I'll repeat again: no control, no glory.
Fantastic. Thank you. So for somebody stepping into a D365 program that's already in flight, how can they assess whether governance is working or needs attention?
So I'll refer to the sort of minimum viable governance again. So sort of like a health check, which you combine with the evidence of the project's actual status. So it's two birds, one stone. So my core artifacts are sort of a good starting point. Well, I see them as a good starting point. So the contract, because that's what everything needs to align back to.
Hmm.
Is there a baseline scope? Is the plan viable? Is there a race in place? Spend being tracked effectively? I mean, look at the RAID log. When was it last reviewed, updated? How's that being managed? Risks, as I said, risks, are they being actively managed? Is there a decision log? Um, Actions, are they being logged and actively managed? There's loads of things that you can kind of dip into and look at. But I think it's quite a good starting point. And as I said, kill two birds with one stone with this, because you can establish whether or not the governance is actually working, whether there is any governance in place, and if it's working effectively. And two, you also get a reasonably quick understanding of the actual project status, which is pretty key.
Yeah, fantastic. So final words of advice for anyone underestimating governance in their digital transformation.
Yeah, just don't. I mean,
Just don't underestimate it.
don't.
Yeah,
Um, I think there's quite a nice statement that says governance isn't a luxury; it's the backbone of digital transformation, and I think that's true, because without it, you sort of risk scope creep, delivery delays, compliance failures, wasted investment. And as I mentioned earlier, when it's done right, governance will help accelerate progress, aligns stakeholders, clarifies accountability, and enables confident decision making. And it's not red tape, it is your strategic safety net.
yeah, absolutely. Well, Andy, thank you so much for all of your wisdom. I've learned a lot today, as I always do. And I'm sure that our listeners will as well. Think that that would be very relevant for both Microsoft partners and end users as well, if they were embarking on a Dynamics implementation. So thanks again. And to our listeners, we are showing on Spotify and also YouTube. So if you search D365 Insights by Source and Connect, we will come up. But I'll also be sharing this on LinkedIn as well. So thank you so much again, Andy. It was absolutely amazing to have you on.
My pleasure. It's been great.
No worries. And yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.